We're recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Sorry we're late. Every time we have to figure out what we're doing. But welcome to Apropos.
We've never seen computers before.
They're different every time.
Yeah.
Welcome. This is Apropos, the show where all of our parens are balanced and our REPL is always in sync with our code. We're four Clojurers. We're four Clojurers, and we are going to talk about the news. And then we'll jump into the REPL if we have time. If you're watching this on YouTube, you missed it live. There is a link to a Discord channel in the show notes, and you should be able to join that. It's like an invitation. And there you can find us chatting and video streaming live. Otherwise, you can just watch us later on YouTube. Okay. Well, let's introduce the panel. We've got Ray.
Hi.
Mia.
Hello.
And Mike.
Yeah, I'm still the same. I didn't change. Unlike the computer.
He's immutable. He's immutable. Established
You're still like a vampire.
I'm pretty sure you've got more machines behind you than you used to have.
But
I'd say you're accreting,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
They're
accrete.
stacking.
They stack up, but they don't change. The ones on the bottom stay there.
That's true.
Now, have you had to install like a new circuit, like an electrical circuit?
I did. I did another
50 amp or something.
Ring.
Nothing to my house. No. I do wonder about that. Like, what if I turn all these things on at once? Will it be like the Millennium Falcon? Wookiee will come out and whack the wall and start the power back up again. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or they could run just fine, and then you like plug in your phone and. All right, so we have some show notes today. Let me share them in the chat so that people can follow along. Live show chat is the channel you want to be in to get these chats. There we go. Oh, we already had them in there. Never mind. Thank you. Who was that, Mia? Thank you. All right, so news. Clojure gets a new feature. It's coming out in 1.11. It's already in alpha. You can already try it out.
It's accreting. It's not changing anything. Well,
it is changing something. It's old behavior.
Adding new behavior to an existing. It's not going to break anything, right?
Ooh, maybe.
Or will it? We'll talk about the feature and decide that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could break somebody if they were expecting an error and now that doesn't give them an error.
Yeah, or now, yeah. You were catching
Is that counted as is that counted as breaking things when you don't? Stuff? When you would have created an error in the past. Now
it's a good question.
I don't count that as a break.
Yeah, hopefully you're not relying on that creating an error somewhere in your code.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like it should remove a lot of code. If you upgraded your Clojure, now you should be able to, like a lot of people in like projects and stuff, they have the options map, and now it seems like you should be able to not have an options map, just have like the keywords in there. We should demonstrate for the people.
Feature, yeah.
Talk about the feature first, yeah.
I'm going to try to share my screen or share something. Share my screen.
Make sure we, quote, grok this feature.
I want to show that. Mm-hmm. Go live. Can y'all see that?
No.
I think you have to accept.
Yeah, you have to click on the live button, remember? Oh. So anyone watching live, you have to click on Eric's live button.
If you're watching, and especially Mike, so we get in the recording.
I am. Yeah, I see the REPL now. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Cool. So there's actually some code. I'm going to type it in, like verbatim. this is in that blog post on the Clojure.org site. So if you have a function that does this funky rest keys destructuring, this always worked before. Like this. Boom. Then you could, oh wait, let me make it do something. Right, so this is the funky destructuring of a sequence of key value pairs, not a map, right? It never worked with a map before. So if I called it with like A1 like that,
okay,
it would destructure that. It would make it a rest, so it'd have the ampersand that makes it a sequence, and then destructuring a sequence with a map would do this map keys destructuring, right? So
and
it would turn it into a map.
We could talk about that feature. Like, I have a couple of thoughts about it, and I don't know if they're correct or not. One is that this might be intended to make it a little bit easier when you're at the REPL and you just want to feed a bunch of parameters to a function.
Right.
I don't know. Like, you just want to type them in as a human, like A1, B2, whatever.
Yeah.
And then my other thought was that the entire community may have moved away from this or started to feel that it was not a best practice or a little odd. I don't know where I picked that up from.
I mean, the idea behind it is like keyword arguments are good because once you have more than a couple of arguments, you have to start remembering the positions of them. And so this way you can put them in any order. All you just have to remember their names. Makes it much more readable. And it was always kind of weird though, because it was like, wait, you're destructuring a sequence with a map, and it's going to consider it a sequence of key value pairs. But the problem is if you wanted to, this is good for humans, right? Like it talks about in the blog post. This is good for people.
Okay.
Yeah. It said that this is great for people because, at the REPL or in a line of code, you're just typing out the options. But then if you're trying to build on top of that, how do you splat out if you have a map of options that you got from somewhere, like you computed it somewhere, and now your program needs to pass them to it? There's no real way to do it.
How would you do that?
Because if you turn it into a sequence, then it's key value pairs and not a sequence of keys and values.
Like just sitting there, yeah.
And so the destructuring stops working. And so people have had workarounds, like they would define it without the ampersand. Right? They do like this.
Okay.
And then they'd say, oh, you have to wrap it like that. Right? And so that gives you the same behavior, but now you have to wrap it in a map. And it's not as convenient, slightly less convenient. But now with the new feature, let's go back.
You can have your cake and eat it too.
Here. You can have cake and eat it.
Okay.
I don't know what you do with the cake. I guess it used to be kind of rare to have cake. And so like you did want to just have it just to show people like, look, I got a cake. All right. Anyway, I didn't sleep too well last night.
Maybe
now you can just get a cake at the supermarket.
I think you had too much king cake, man.
King cake.
Did you eat that plastic baby that got to your brain? That plastic baby.
But see, now you can do both. You can do both.
Okay.
You get both behaviors.
Both.
So I don't know which one is the cake and which one is eating it, but they're both there.
But what about if you get rid of the, if you just pass nothing into it?
Oh, good question.
Oh, Ray. Okay. Why, Ray? Why would you do that? Okay.
You get a nil, but you can do like, give them value.
I know.
What is it called? Use? No.
Or? Are you trying to give them a default value?
That's right. Or.
Yeah, let's see. Or.
So you could do.
Or A1 or something.
You got to flip them around. Okay. Actually, I think it's
you do like 1A like that.
No, I think
you don't need the keyword anymore, do you?
I think you put the symbol A first.
Yeah.
The symbol A first?
Symbol A1.
Oops. Oh, man.
Maybe one more parens. Okay. So
Wait,
I want to say
you
flip your
put the
one in
symbol
your
A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to have, boom.
Okay.
And if I call it with, where's the nothing? I lost it. There. No arguments. A has 1. Look at that. As opposed to nil, which it had before.
Yeah.
Now with all of these, you can put an argument before that stuff, right?
But
Like
you've
before
put the
ampersand.
ampersand in there still, though, Eric.
I did put the ampersand in. Would you like me to not have it?
Ray,
Yeah,
what's
don't
It's
have
supposed to be in there to do the structuring.
Don't have it.
Yep.
Let's see what happens without it. I think it will not work. It'll say not enough arguments.
It wants
is
at least a map.
1 argument.
It'll say, sorry, Charlie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then if you do pass the other ones, I mean, it's a question of what behavior you want, you know? Because
That's right.
You know,
So you could do that. But here's the thing. You can also do this. This is going to be weird. A1. I'm expecting this to work. It worked.
yeah.
Something weird. Gave you. It destructured it though, right?
Yeah. If you put B2, it should all work as well. Yeah.
Let's put a 2 to B3. Let's try that. But look, then the A didn't get.
Ooh.
Oh
yeah.
man, I'm confused now.
Oh, no, this is not good. We found a bug.
The
It's on the line.
or should have.
What are you doing?
But you were doing it with a vector, so I guess you're all better off, really, you know?
You're passing a
No,
vector
because you
in
should
where-
be able to destructure a
It's an
sequence
associative,
with a
yeah.
map.
Wait. Keys?
Yeah, you're doing keys on a
This might
vector. What happens if you, well, who knows what
This
keys?
is what happens when you test the limits,
Because
huh?
that's a specific DSL thing, isn't it, that keys?
Like if I do this, keys A, A1,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to output A. Well, that's weird.
It doesn't seem weird to me, but, you know, I think the thing that worked was weird, personally.
I'm pretty sure that, I mean, maybe it's only for lists and not for vectors. And that the reason this worked with the 1 is because the key is 1 or 0. And I don't know. We'll see.
So,
Look,
so keys would work on anything that's associative, right? Which a vector is. But you would be trying to...
there we go. If it's a list, it works.
Right.
Yeah, it's because the vector is associative. But if you do it with a list, which is what the
list,
ampersand turns into. Okay, so that should solve this.
Huh.
I
don't
know.
like
huh?
that.
The
What are you doing?
ampersand was present in that particular invocation. But I guess all arguments are lists.
There we go. Now life makes sense again. Okay. Any more to say about this?
So the question is, why do people go away from this style? I guess, Mike.
The keyword stuff? Like,
Yeah.
Because they want to use it from another program.
it's hard to, like, it's good for a human, but it makes it really hard to call programmatically. Is that the argument? And it's just like, come on. You've made something that's really easy for a human, but then all of a sudden no one can easily call it programmatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this makes sense.
As a general thing, I kind of like that pattern where you have some like required arguments that you just kind of put first, and then you say, okay, anything after that goes into a map. That's a simple pattern, you know. Like you put an ops map at the end as a catch-all, things you haven't thought about right now that might need to go in the future. And then you could have like this other argument where everything is always just a map. You know, that's like if you think about mathematically, a function, you know, just taking a single argument always.
You could do this. Oops.
I think the problem with
Yes.
having maps all the time
All
is
the
that
time.
it becomes quite tedious. Because
Oh,
you
yeah,
have to
yeah.
create maps. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
I
you
mean,
know,
it's 2 more
to me,
characters.
you know, it's like
I don't know.
there was a joke on Twitter, I think, this week about how many arguments does it take before you move to a map?
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know?
Uh-huh.
My answer was 69, but I work at Tesla. You know?
So it seems, I mean, it seems to me like they're really saying it should have been a map all along, but we have to maintain backwards compatibility. Right? That's, I mean, because it doesn't seem like that inconvenient to open a new map.
Oh, like when you're a human typing at the REPL.
Yeah, when you're a human.
Yeah, I mean that is. Like, come on, it's just an
Two
extra
characters,
squiggle.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So it does
Yeah.
seem. It seems debatable whether 2 characters is really that human friendly.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
This is-
I think backwards compatibility is important. So whatever they
Oh,
chose,
yeah.
it's still there. And we were wondering before the show started whether this would break something, because someone was relying on errors. That
Yeah.
it's possible, you know, you write code and it works, and you ship it, and then one day you don't realize, like, oh, I had to try catch on it, and that's why it worked. No takers on this discussion.
No.
It is a change in behavior which could break something. Because what's that rule that anyone will discover all behaviors? I can't remember the name of that one.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it breaks, if you're watching and it breaks anything you did, let us know.
Fix it. Fix it.
We want to find the case. We want to find the thing that it breaks.
Yeah, well, and I've heard that Cognitect is actually pretty good at running like a bunch of open source projects test suites with the new Clojure alphas when they come out, just to see, just like, you know, they've got a list of like the important projects that they don't want to break, and you know, before they release the thing and have everybody's thing break, they just want to make sure, like, okay, give them a chance to fix their code.
That is definitely done with Clojure script, where there's a thing called Canary that runs some of the prominent projects, and just exactly for the reason you said, to make sure.
Yeah. Cool. And it's also why you do alphas first. People find their bugs.
Give it a spin and see if it works. Yeah.
Next.
Oh,
on
just
the
before we
docket.
move on, I mean, isn't it the nice thing is that you know, it's like welcome Fergus to the core team.
Oh yeah.
Got a feature.
Boy's made his first commit in public, and he's got something nice. So good little improvement there by Fergus. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more to come from him. So it's good that he's like broke his duck, as they say in English.
What?
What does that
What?
mean?
What?
It's a cricketing term, actually, to break your duck. If you
Oh,
get
that
out of
English.
cricket, if you're out of cricket and you have 0 score, it's called a duck. So if you break your duck, if you're out for a duck, then if you get past 0, then you break your duck.
Sorry about that, Fergus. Sorry. Yes.
You could be making this up.
Yeah, I could
You
be.
could be making this up and we wouldn't know.
I think
I
that
know.
cricket is the joke on America in the English-speaking world, where they just
What-
make stuff up all the time.
What do you call it? Do you call it a similar
thing?
thing, like for baseball or something, or when the guy could get out for 0, or is there
Like a
phrase?
no-hitter? Something like that? Or like
Yeah.
a strikeout, but without...
Strikeout, that's what it is, isn't it? Yeah. Break, do you have such a thing, like when you
you
like
strike out, or you...
score?
Mhm. That's the thing.
But what does that have to do with? So
Why
when
did Bogus strike
when
out?
do you break your duck?
You break your duck when you get a score. When you make your first commit to Clojure call, you know.
Oh, he hit the ball. He hit the ball and got a run. Is that
Or
what
you
you
got to
saying?
run.
No,
you know.
he put points on the board. He put
You got
points on the board.
Exactly, that's what it is. Yeah. So break your duck,
Yes.
points on the board. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
All
Sorry
right.
about your duck, Fogus.
Yeah, sorry it's broken.
Oh,
No ducks were hurt in the production of Disclosure. Just trying to add that. Okay.
Oh my goodness. So next in the show notes, who was it? Yogthos. I don't know how you pronounce that. Dmitry Sotnikov. He posted a tweet about how Reagent hasn't changed in 8 years. Your components still run, whereas it shows how React changes about once a year, and
yeah.
you
That's
had
a
to
good
keep
point. Yeah.
changing your code. The reason I thought that was interesting is I occasionally dip into the JavaScript React world, and I have to relearn everything again. And like all my resources, like all the blog posts I used to use to learn how to do it, they don't work anymore, and that's quite annoying. And then I go back to Reagent, and everything just works. And I mean, I remember the first release. I mean, it's basically the same. It might have changed a little bit, like added new features, but I haven't had to change anything.
One comment I would make too along those lines is when I look at modern Java, I have difficulty in reading some of that stuff now because I've moved away from it. But whenever I type Java into my compiler, it compiles and works.
It still works.
They're very careful there, right? There's something about the mentality there in the Java ecosystem where like
it's a creative.
But is it true that that React broke all of its old code? I don't think so.
No.
So
The old code still works.
There was a version of React, like I think 0.14 or something, like a long time ago, where it did a breaking change. But I think overall they're quite good at keeping backward compatibility as well. So it's like I think evolution occurs.
Yeah.
They're allowed to have better ideas and they're allowed to make things better, just like Fogus did.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a weird criticism actually in some ways. Because you can always like pick and say, okay, well, the feature evolved.
Getting better fast, too fast.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's true. But someone made that comment in the tweet thread, and it's just also kind of annoying when you go to a new code base, and because they started last spring instead of 4 years ago, like all your knowledge doesn't work anymore.
Well, but I mean, I had this, funny enough, I was talking to some guy a few years ago about Clojure, and he was saying something similar, which was that, now if you think about it, he started Clojure, 7 or 8 years ago or whatever. And he was saying, but now you've got all these things like you have multi-method, you have protocols, you have core async, you have all these different things that have come on board since the beginning of Clojure. And the Clojure would still work from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and that's fine. But the sort of what's idiomatic Clojure has evolved.
That's true.
I just find like this idea that that things evolving is bad to be very annoying. I think that's a good thing.
So I think that I'm reading this comment now, and Dimitri's issue was that best practices have changed a lot in React over the years as the ecosystem goes through different frameworks. And so it's, React has been pretty, they've maintained backwards compatibility pretty well, but the idea of what is good React has changed. Whereas
I'd argue that that's kind of like coming in our direction because a lot of it is becoming more and more functional.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but I think that I think that what is good React is eventually going to hit what Clojure already does with React, right? What good React should hit Reagent eventually.
Right.
I think
it's
Reagent
pretty
is
close.
the best version of React. But like it's it's becoming more functional because that's what works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think like from my perspective, if I was going to fault it for something, it's that Reagent came out and it hasn't needed to change. like they somehow solved the hard problem right away in one swoop, whereas React seems to be changing and like never really solving the problem. Like they keep, I don't know,
What
solving
is
other
the
problems.
problem?
The problem is reacting to state change. So, React gives you a nice way to functionally generate the GUI, right? As like you get data in and you get GUI out, and it's very functional and it composes well. But then, how do you react to some state that is changing? And in Reagent, you just make an atom and you deref it inside your component, and it keeps track of what you've derefed and adds a watcher. So every time that atom changes, your components will re-render. And it's been that way since 2013 or 2014. And React has had a series of attempts, like with Redux, and I don't even know all of them. Now there's something called
Hooks.
Well, yeah, Hook is like a broader API than just state management. But
Yeah, I'm so old, I didn't realize they'd moved past Redux.
oh yeah, Redux is out now. But I think to me, it's like the community doesn't. This is gonna sound so bad, right? But the community doesn't have an eye for like what is the hard problem, and let's just solve it, and we can move on. It seems like they are just churning on like, oh, what if we did it like this, and what if we did it like that? Maybe more hammock time is what I would say.
I mean, it sounds like they're churning on solutions for the hard problem. So I think that they found the hard problem.
Why don't they just get straight to it like the Reagent did?
Hold on.
What was wrong with Redux?
Yeah, but hold on. They did solve the hard problem. I mean, they solved the hard problem. The first hard problem. The first hard problem is how do you, have a function over the view.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a big debt to pay to React, and now you could argue that if React, I think this is an argument before that if React went away, a Clojure script version of React would just pop up. So I don't think it would be a big deal. But what I was going to say was, I think when React started, it wasn't too far from what was idiomatic JavaScript at the time, and I think JavaScript itself has moved on. You've got ES6 and ES7 and things like that. Those things have become more functional. You've got these kind of like
you got TypeScript,
and they've got TypeScript now as well. Yeah,
which TypeScript plus React is great.
Yeah, but even forgetting TypeScript for the moment, because I think they're trying to appeal to the JavaScript community. The JavaScript community itself has evolved. So what happened with React was Reagent. Reagent is essentially leveraging everything that's in Clojure, all those ideas.
Right.
So what you're really saying, I think, is that Clojure had all the right defaults.
That's right.
JavaScript had all the wrong defaults. Yeah. And React did some good things in terms of changing the default way that Vue was treated, but didn't get all the other concomitant defaults right, and it's struggling to get there. And I agree with that. But it's because of the ecosystem they sit within and what's idiomatic for those people. I think that's why they're struggling a little bit, because immutability is not really like first class over there.
Right.
They have they had immutable JS and stuff like this at the beginning,
but they weren't very.
They had a lot of the answers lying around, but they couldn't persuade people to use it.
I think you're absolutely right that Reagent is built on top of a stack that allows for just make one little piece more and you've got this great solution. A lot of the
it's also
the machinery. Go ahead.
Oh no!
I was going to say a lot of the machinery in the React JavaScript world is more about dealing with this JavaScript object can change at any point. We can't tell when it does, And so you have to call methods and all, there's all sorts of stuff around it. And so if you did have an immutability discipline that you maintained as the programmer, you could just cut through all that and like just use hooks and a couple of libraries and you're done. You've basically rewritten Reagent, and get on with your coding. And the other thing I want to say is I think that we did have a lot of churn at the beginning. We had Ohm and Ohm Next and other stuff. But Reagent kind of, emerged as like, yeah, this is actually a pretty good way to do it. And maybe the JavaScript community churns through stuff is kind of a hive mind. They're like, we don't know if this is a good idea. We'll try it. And then everybody tries it and they say, oh, this is a new thing. It's going to solve all the problems. And then they realize, no, maybe that's not going to work. Whereas
I think it's just the sheer size.
The size.
Like you talk about the hard problem. There's lots of hard problems, actually. One of the big hard problem is the size of the community, right?
Yeah.
You say the JavaScript, when we talk about the Clojure community, like, we know each other,
Yeah.
Even though the Clojure community became
everybody.
like the fact that
literally everybody.
The fact that they're Nubank as a company might be at this point a significant fraction of the Clojure community, right? They have like 600 Clojure devs, right? Think about that. You think about the size of Clojure, it's so much easier to control and to reach a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas JavaScript is, I don't even want to throw numbers out for the size of the JavaScript community. It's enormous. For JavaScript to have converged on React at all is remarkable, is a testament to how good React is. But it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot longer for that community to converge on solutions, and especially when you have to maintain so much backwards compatibility. I mean, the things that we use JavaScript for are there's so many more ways that JavaScript is used than Clojure, and you have to maintain. Like some people are still working on stuff that might have to run on Internet Explorer, right?
I hope not.
I hope not. I hope not. But I actually think that there is a meta hard problem there, and that is it has to be usable.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of my point, is that it has to be in sympathy with the surrounding kind of state of mind, almost of the developers, and because I think they did try this immutable JS. They saw it. They know all the ideas. I mean, I don't think there's an education gap in the people who write React.
Right.
They know about David's work. They know about all the kind of stuff that Dimitri has done. They know about this stuff. They're aware of it. It's just translating it and getting it right in something that is like idiomatic JavaScript for whatever value that is. That's a really hard problem. I think to support what Mia's saying.
And I would love to see everyone move to Reagent, because I do think Reagent is the best React. But there could be there are just so many more variables once you get up to that scale that JavaScript is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think that I'd like your thoughts on this, but I like evolution, I like change, I like innovation, and I'm kind of like almost, I appreciate stability in terms of backward compatibility and stuff like that, but I also I get kind of annoyed by the fact that let's just be honest. I mean, Spec, for example, was innovative, but it's sort of stopped. It's kind of ground to a halt. And I think the ability for people in the Clojure community to innovate all, is kind of like externalized, and that's an interesting place as to where does innovation occur in your community. If you're in the React world, then you're looking at Facebook to do the innovation, because they've got all the engineering, and we're looking to Cognitech to do the engineering. And
Sure.
I like this thing from Fogus. It's got numbers on the board, but we're not wetting ourselves about it, are we? It's not exactly the next great thing. It's a bit of a he's done a nice thing, and that's good.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly groundbreaking stuff, which I'm sure he will admit this. But so where's the innovation coming from? Maybe it's a broader question, but I'm always a bit nervous about criticizing
Borkent.
communities for churn when. Sorry.
Borkent, Mikhail Borkent.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing everything now, it seems.
Yeah, well, a single man is a single.
Yeah.
That's how big the Clojure community is. Yeah, one bloke can be the engine of all innovation.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't know.
I'm doing some stuff at the moment in Reframe with my son, and we're learning a bit about Reframe. And actually, Reframe itself is built on top of Reagent, and if you think about hard problems, what Mike did there was a really hard problem, to get that kind of signal graph working.
Mm-hmm.
But it had also had problems, in terms of scale, also in terms of the fact that it's different from core async, the fact that some people want more than one atom. There are various things with Reframe that are kind of points that people would criticize, and he's looking again at doing another version of it, and why not?
Sure,
but
evolve.
funnily enough, I happen to as part of teaching my son this stuff, I use this other framework called Recom, which is a sort of CSS HTML kind of wrapper as well, because I don't want to touch any of this stuff if I can avoid it. I just want everything in Clojure and Hiccup, basically. And so with Recom and Reframe, you can have everything in Clojure and you never, ever touch HTML or CSS or anything, which is really great. And it's just built on Flexbox, which is pretty standard CSS these days. And it's excellent. And they've built some amazing things in this Recom, big complex tables. You can run spreadsheets in this thing. It's pretty phenomenal what's going on. And I think sometimes we look to the center a bit too much for innovation and forget what's going on in the in the big sort of projects. All right, so it's something maybe we as a show might want to emphasize a little bit. Look at some of these bigger projects and see where the evolution is occurring. Because always looking at the Cognitech blog turns out to be a bit boring,
It is true that as a talking head on a Clojure news show, I have started to wish Clojure changed more than I did before I was a talking head on a Clojure news show. We do have some
trouble every time we do a show. Like, what do we talk about? It's funny you mentioned innovation at the center, because in React, I feel like when they released hooks, they unleashed the rest of the community. Because before that, it was very hard to compose behavior.
Yeah.
But React hooks lets you build new behavior that you could just include very easily in a new component. And so that has made this flourishing of libraries that don't have to do a really complicated, higher order component thing where now the inner components have to obey some rules that you don't really want to obey. You have this function that you call, usually it starts with use, and that installs a hook in that component. And I think that has made this flourishing of composable things. So they're getting there, and I think hooks was a huge advance.
Yeah, so I think
so much so that I think that maybe we should relook at our wrapper. Like, do we need a wrapper anymore? Can we just use React directly? We can make Clojure functions or JavaScript functions really easily. You know, we'd probably want to use Clojure maps instead of JavaScript objects, but you know, besides that kind of stuff, we could go more directly to React.
I'm trying to remember, Mike, who's the guy that did the Android port of Replete?
Roman Lutikov.
Oh yeah, Roman Lutikov. Yeah, he did a series of videos implementing hooks and the sort of latest version of the React framework in ClojureScript.
Oh,
He just live it all, and it's on YouTube somewhere. It's really good to watch. You know, I mean, the guy's a good coder, no doubt about it. You know,
yeah.
and so he's doing some like live sessions in basically making hooks, you know, like with ClojureScript, raw ClojureScript, and yeah, you know, inevitably, like you say, Reagent is there. If they wanted to do something, they would have to, you know, change their infrastructure.
The
And
criticism,
maybe the idea of this tweet is we're not changing shit, mate. You know, I don't know.
the criticism of Reagent is that the React community has built all these tools around components, and we can't participate that easily.
And that's a bad thing. That is a really bad thing, because you know that's galling. You know, because if you think about the idea of like you know, the island mentality is that with Java you can consume everything. You know, it's really good, and with JavaScript it's not so good. You know, and there's a lot of nice things out there that we don't want to reinvent. Yeah.
Right, and the whole philosophy of Clojure is to be a little bit parasitic and to take advantage of the ecosystem of another platform. And if we can't do that, we've lost something.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there, Eric. Yeah.
Don't know if parasitic is the word.
That's, I mean, I don't know of a better word. It's not symbiotic because we don't give back that much.
Let's
say
leveraging.
It's like benign.
There's a name for this relationship in biology, because a parasitic implies that you are harming the host.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Just like benign.
I used to know this.
Like you're benefiting, but they're not being harmed. Neutral.
Yeah, it's. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look this up because
you look it up. We're going to move to the next topic.
Commensalism. Commensalism.
Of course.
It's commensalism. Yes.
Where's commensalate?
No.
Commensalism.
Oh, so there's a.
I think this should definitely be some sort of framework in Clojure now, because it's a dictionary entry, you know? You've got to explain. It's like induction. Yeah, commensal.
That's cool.
Yeah, an example is hermit crabs use snail shells. Spiders build their webs on plants.
But the snails don't get hurt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. All right, so there's another blog post.
I think you've opened up our eyes to this one, Eric. Though that, like you say, we want to be able to consume things from the broader community, and where our lack of evolution actually is actually harmful in this case.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually, you know, it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I've been doing React since 2013, which is the year it came out. And people are like, oh, wow, have you heard of this? And you use that, and like, huh? No. I mean, I just type, you know, defen blah, 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 and get some deref some atoms, and like, it just works. And they're like, oh, but you got hooks, and you got contexts, and and then you got this Apollo, and it hooks into there, and you have a provider for GraphQL. I'm like, what? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't believe that Redux got replaced.
Oh yeah, but the guy who made Redux made hooks. They hired him at Facebook, and he made hooks.
So if something comes out, you probably shouldn't use it for like at least a year, right? Let it settle and see if it's going to be around for the following summer or two.
I mean, it's true, because we don't have the army of people to try everything Like,
Yeah.
I remember when VS Code, it was maybe already 2 years old, and people were like, how does Clojure not have a VS Code plugin? I was like, it just came out. Like, Atom. I thought we were all talking about Atom, and now we're talking about VS Code. But, like, yeah, that's what you got to do in the modern world. You got to be in the VS Code, and then that's going to get old one day, and it's the nature of our business, of our industry. All right. How much can a Clojure developer do alone? It's a blog post. I thought, so this guy's
Is this
answering.
Morkent or nah?
No. How much can Borkent do alone? 10x programmer over there. So no, this is a guy answering a question on Quora. Somebody was like struggling learning Clojure and was like, I don't believe that I'll be more productive in this. And so he goes to explain like why you will be if you persist and learn.
Like learn it by yourself.
He was saying you shouldn't learn it by yourself. That was one of the conclusions in the thing. Like that there's too much tribal knowledge about like how to use a REPL, what idiomatic code does and why. And I kind of tend to agree with that. I think I've seen a lot of people start with Clojure, and there's so much that they need to learn in terms of, hey, we would use a map for that, or we would, probably not def inside of a function, or there's all this stuff that's legal in the language, but that they need to learn from
Well,
someone.
and the tribal knowledge with the REPL in particular, especially because so much of how you use a REPL is integrated with your editor.
Yeah.
And, the editors that we like to use have their own set of tribal knowledge.
Yep.
It just, like, probably the easiest editor for beginners to start with, I think, is IntelliJ with cursive. But I actually find using a REPL in cursive to be difficult, which is why I no longer use cursive. I moved away from it once I started doing more REPL-driven development. It's just there's fewer steps to open a REPL in Emacs.
I don't understand that.
I've always felt that.
That's it.
I don't. Yeah.
There's one keystroke.
I was never able to get REPL integration working correctly with IntelliJ.
Well, okay, that's tribal knowledge, but honestly, we use almost everyone in our company uses IntelliJ, and we have REPLs open all day long. So I don't think that anything.
It's tribal knowledge since everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Because it's integrated with your editor, if you don't have people who are using that editor around to help you, like I ended up migrating to Spacemacs because that's what the people around me were using, and I was able to get the most tribal knowledge for that.
Right. You could ask someone a question and you'd get an answer. That is really important. And it's doubly hard because if you're learning a new language and an editor and like a workflow at the same time, it's a lot to pick up. And I could see it's not like there's some guide that's like, do this in this order. Like while you're learning the syntax, you got to also be getting the keystrokes for how to send stuff to the REPL all at the same time. I wish there were, but someone who's like, you hear it, you still hear it. Oh, it takes too long to run the tests. Yeah, that's because you're starting it at the command line, like every time. Like it should be a keystroke to run your tests, but they don't know that. Where does it say that?
But when you're just learning Clojure for the first time, I don't know if you were like me, but don't you just start up the REPL? Like I would do line REPL all the time back then. Just fire it up and type a form or two, really short things just to learn.
You started up to test things.
Well, maybe I could.
But
have some
very
info.
quickly, what you're trying to do is. Sorry, you go.
Right.
I was just going to say, I'm teaching my son Clojure and ClojureScript at the moment. So I've got a live one. It's And but we do like an hour a day every like 3 or 4 days a week. We do an hour of Clojure programming, and I taught him like REPL first, and went through like these tutorials online about how to get started and how to like +1 2 and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And but obviously I've got a sort of pedagogical streak, and I also have and he's my son, so I want to give him the best shot. So I taught him, again, tribal knowledge. I taught him cursive because that's what I know. And then we sort of worked on a project, a little project. Like he's into games, I'm into games, but I didn't want to make them a video game because that's too complicated. So I started with a simple game, like what do they call it?
Tic-tac-toe?
Noughts and crosses,
Tic-tac-toe.
Tic-tac-toe, yeah. And then you have then we started with dominoes and drafts and stuff like that. And actually, things like drafts are quite complicated, it turns out.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Representing a board and moves, what moves are legal.
Kind of stuff. But it gradually, it went quite quickly from something fairly simple to something quite complicated. But we're always doing everything, all the kind of stuff. When I say we want to learn something, we're always doing it at the REPL. We're always like, okay, work out at the REPL how to do these things, just like we do on the show, And then you put it into the program. Then you integrate it with the program. Now, I know people have this idea that you should run the program in the REPL, and it doesn't matter. I don't really care about that. But
if you're just trying to learn the language, line REPL was enough for me back then. I think I was that way for months. Just learning, like, how do you make functions? How do keywords work? And how do you look up stuff in maps? And
but those kind of things you can learn in a couple of days, But I think like, you just do something fairly straightforward, and you get there pretty quickly. Because the surface of language is pretty small,
Yeah.
So the problem is like, well, how do I make things work in a kind of like for something practical that I want to enjoy, Like
you want to make something.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're going to do something, you have to like invent an itch or have an itch,
Cool. Any other tips for learning Clojure? What's important to learn?
I was going to suggest, I remember when I started going to meetups, and that's the whole subject of learning it alone. And I felt like I accelerated my learning by just going to meetups and talking to other people about things like, oh, that's how that, you quickly
breathing each other's droplets over a keyboard.
So that was like when we started up Apropos, that was like an idea. It was like, oh, let's just do REPL things here, because it's just like so fast to just see other people struggle. Like, oh, that's how your mind works when you're trying to solve that kind of thing or puzzling through that.
Yeah.
So much better than just trying to figure it out all by yourself. Yeah.
Another thing that the article talks about is how you are more productive in Clojure compared to other languages. Now, I'm just stating its opinion, the opinion that it expresses, and that Clojure was designed for that. Clojure was designed for small teams to take on large consulting projects. And it talks about how a small team can seem bigger on the outside because of how productive you are. And they claim, the author claims, it's because things are composable, more readable, and you can get to interesting levels of abstraction. What do y'all think about that? Does Clojure make people more productive than some other language?
Maybe a factor of 2. I don't know. It's not a factor of 5 for me.
No. I think a lot of it is, again, comes back to something we talked about earlier on, which is the default. Because some of these defaults are really good, it's those defaults that make you productive, I think. If any language has those defaults, then it will, or if you pick those defaults in another language, you could also be as productive, because you kind of avoiding a lot of the hard edges or the hard problems, actually, like Mia was saying, it's like, you just avoid a lot of complexity.
Sure. You get more modularity. Immutability gives you modularity. 2 pieces of code don't have to worry about sharing. They can share freely.
What I thought was really interesting, the third paragraph of that, his how much faster is your Clojure development section there, which is Clojure is a concise language, and he actually cites a study that correlates more lines of code with more bugs. And there was a large-scale study where I guess Clojure was one of 4 languages where language choice is statistically significantly correlated with software quality. And it just is more code, more bugs. And it's true that, the thing that appealed to me very early on about Clojure was how you could be eloquent without writing a lot of code. I think the conciseness is a huge selling point. That's something I don't know if we talk about a lot, where you're reducing complexity. When we talk about reducing complexity, we tend to talk about it in terms of that, like at the abstractions level, but reducing complexity just in how much code you're writing is a big win. But it's also it can be confusing to go into if you've been working on something that has a whole bunch of boilerplate.
Right.
So, how much more productive you are in Clojure after you know what you're doing is different from how much more productive you are in Clojure when you're still trying to figure out how to write it as Clojure. Clojure that is written in very I've seen Clojure that's written as if it were object oriented, right? I think we've all seen Java in Clojure, and that is not any more productive.
Protocols
and
for
it
everything.
is you get a lot of bugs there, and you end up with huge files where you have to hunt these things down. So that's Clojure is not necessarily
I was going to add to that is like the more code you have, the less productive you become, actually, because you have there's more to hold in your head per namespace and like test suite or whatever. Every time you make these, you compact the abstractions a little bit, then the weight of each of those things becomes lower, and that's huge. But abstractions are always very hard to come up with. They always feel natural when you see the good one, but they're quite tricky to sort of, they're a bit ineffable. It's difficult to say exactly what the right one is.
Another thing,
pornography, you know it when you see it.
I like it when I see it. Is that what you're saying?
You know it when you see it.
Oh, okay.
You never.
Mike said that he would say a factor of 2 in like per person productivity, and so I think that's selling it short. I think that you do get. I mean, it's hard to say you'd be more productive than twice what you were in some other language. But if that means you have half the people, you have this network effect of how much communication does your team have to do, which grows exponentially. And if you can halve the number of people, you actually get a huge benefit, that exponential curve of like the amount of communication that has to happen. And that might be in like cost of like training or hiring or what have you. So I think that these linear increases in productivity, like, oh, it's just 2x. Like, why is that such a big deal? I'll just hire twice as many people. Yeah, but now you're exponentiating.
I'm also like Ray. My son is learning Java right now, and he'll hit a tough concept, and I'm trying to explain it to him. And oftentimes it's much easier just to say, hey, here's how you would think about this in Clojure. Here's the answer. It's like a 1 or 2 liner. Whereas you like if you try to explain that in Java, it's at least, oh man, right?
What exactly is a abstract final class? Like,
Or just or just the best example of that is the idea. If you're trying to, my son was struggling with what is a callback. You know, he had never seen that idea before. What is a callback really? And you can see, like, if you try to explain that in Clojure, man, it's just like one parameter going into a function that gets called, right?
right.
If you want to explain that in Java, you're like, okay, you have to make an interface that has a method and, you know, pass this object that implements that into something and then call that one. Yeah. Oh. And then it's, he doesn't have the patience, right? You've lost him before you. It's like you're, 15 minutes into trying to explain a callback. Whereas in Clojure, just like here's a REPL, here's a callback.
You get the design
within 30
patterns
seconds.
book out. You're like, oh, it's like the visitor pattern. Let's go through this one. Like, oh goodness.
Another thing I've noticed on this subject is like if you are afraid that Clojure is not as performant as coding something directly in Java, there's the whole thing where you can, because the language is more concise, you can afford to try different variations on your design to try to optimize it. And oftentimes get to something that's just as good, Whereas if your code is like this big calcified thing in Java, then it's like hard to move it around to make it faster, right? So
We're using Java as a straw man, which is something that every language uses now, And so it's like,
It's your
it's more
favorite straw
concise
man,
than Java. Like, hello, that's table stakes nowadays.
yeah.
I wonder if there's like we could have a newer study that's like Clojure versus Python,
So
something
I
where
have a
like
question for you then.
Yeah.
Do you remember like when you were programming in Java, were you like typing as fast as you can to get the stuff in there? Like it's like they're so verbose. You're like trying to get your thoughts out into the code. Whereas in Clojure, you can like it more is in tune with your brain. Whereas like Java, it's like, oh, okay, I need to make a final class, and you're like ripping it out as fast as you can. These like rudimentary concepts, like you just can't type quickly enough to get it.
I think there's something to that. Like, it's not that I can't type quickly enough. It's just I go into like typing mode, and by the time I'm done, I realize, I've created a whole class, and it's got 3 methods. I had an equals that I auto generated with my IDE, and like, okay, now I'm ready to think about what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's true too. It's like that pause where you're like trying to get set up.
Yeah, it's so much just to get started, and I haven't even thought about what I'm doing yet.
Conciseness is a good thing. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to drop off and get ready for my meeting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go
okay.
soon too. We're going long on this one. I thought these were throwaway topics. It was like a tweet, a tweet in a 4-paragraph blog post. We're already at time.
Yeah. All right, call it a day.
All right, well,
We'll have more for next time.
yeah.
All right, see you
Later
everybody.
on, folks. Yeah.